Tonight we begin our annual year-end conversations with the Maritime Premiers. I'll look back at 2025 and ahead to 2026. First up, Nova Scotia's Tim Houston talks cannabis, trade, and energy. Premier Houston, thank you for having us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
As we sit here, cannabis has become a big issue, a focus. You've asked for a crackdown on dispensaries. Your Justice Minister called it a growing public safety problem. In what respects?
Well, obviously we're seeing what's happening there, and I think what we're saying is we should just treat cannabis like we treat booze, right? Weed and booze should be kind of treated the same. So we're concerned about the public safety aspect of it. Obviously there's a lot of these dispensaries popping up. It is really a growing thing. And the supply of that, I've talked to people in law enforcement who say they've tested some of the cannabis that's available through the illegal dispensaries, through the unregulated market. They find traces of fentanyl, lots of pesticides. So we're concerned about that, but we're really concerned about where's it all coming from. There's an organized crime element there. Where's this money going, right? So we have to be mindful of the impacts on communities from organized crime. We have to be mindful of the impacts on health as well, right? In a time when we're making generational investments in healthcare, getting the doctor list down and really trying to make sure people have access to healthcare, we can't look away from these issues that could be contributing to negative outcomes.
What led you to have the Justice Minister present this the way he did, as opposed to speaking with First Nations, addressing the concerns, and then maybe...
Yeah, it's the public we've been hearing from a lot of the public, and people are seeing the growth of it. Drive on the highway, you see the flashing signs, meet your weed needs 24 hours a day, all this type of stuff, right? So it's very visible, and hearing from people in communities too. You think about the people who live in some of these communities, they don't want these shops next door to them. They got
Have they told you that?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I hear from quite a few people. Families, my kids are saying, what are these? Can we go into the store with the flashing lights and all this type of stuff, right? And just think about it. Would you want some of these shops right beside you? Like it brings an element to these communities that has a concern, and people are afraid, quite frankly, because behind organized crime, that's when you see human trafficking. That's when you see the money laundering. You can think of all the negative outcomes.
Have you seen this in Nova Scotia? Are there concrete examples of it?
Well, the connections to organized crime are a major concern for law enforcement, for sure. The stuff is coming from somewhere, and the money's going somewhere. Right?
Some provinces are leery of acting or triggering court challenges around provincial and Indigenous law on this issue. You prepared to go to the courts on this?
As a matter of fact, the courts have already decided. There's lots of court law, case law in Nova Scotia. There was a court cases recently in 2024 that said we're all treaty people. We're all subject to the treaties. This is not a treaty right. It's not an Aboriginal right. It's not something that's legal in this province. The courts have been very clear on that in a number of cases.
Is there some fence mending to do with the First Nations?
My door is always open. The issues. This is a public safety issue. This is the law of the land. The law applies to everyone on this particular, this issue. That's what's at stake. But most of the chiefs have my personal cell phone number, have relationships with them. My door is always open. I will partner with anyone who wants to talk about how we can improve things in Nova Scotia.
Okay, I'd like to move on to trade, because that was such a big issue in the past year. Certainly it looks like it will be in the next year. You were very bullish on getting rid of interprovincial trade barriers. You were perhaps at the forefront of all the premiers in the country on this. An agreement was signed. There were a lot of exclusions, including things like alcohol. Are you satisfied with that agreement? Did it go far enough in your mind?
Like for us here in Nova Scotia, we got rid of it. We got rid of it. So other jurisdictions are working at a different pace, other provinces and territories. So we're kind of pushing and pulling, I guess. At one time, I think the Prime Minister referred to this as the Tim Houston project. But other premiers know, like everybody wants to grow their economy. Our relationship with the United States is really changing, for sure. They're always going to be a trading partner. They're always going to be, relationships there in so many ways. So that's important. But we need to diversify away. So we're looking for other markets for lots of products. But sometimes that other market is a province next door in other parts of the country. So there's work to be done, for sure. But I do feel optimistic that, at the premier level, at the federal government level, the Prime Minister, I know, is on board with this. Sometimes through the system, it takes a little longer. I get calls from people that say, hey, I thought we could, the alcohol thing is fixed. I thought we could put our stuff on a shelf in Ontario, but I'm hearing that that's a problem. So then we got to make a few calls and fix it, right? So there's a bit of whack-a-mole happening there, as it were. But I'm optimistic that as a country we're moving in the right direction on that.
Okay. The vast majority of Nova Scotia exports to the U.S., about 90%, is covered under CUSMA, NAFTA, whatever you want to call it, and is protected. Now, with the U.S. reviewing from their side, reviewing the agreement, there's already been some discussion from the White House that perhaps the President of the United States may want to have separate deals with Mexico and Canada and eliminate CUSMA. What's at risk for Nova Scotia if that isn't renegotiated, similar to as it is now?
Yeah, so the risks for us are the same for the whole country. This is a massive market, the United States. It's right beside us. We do a lot of trade with them. So anything that impedes our ability to access that market is a concern. So I'm concerned about what's happening there. But at the same time, we're also, for a number of products, we're looking at other markets, seafood, forestry, all these things. So we'll continue to look for other markets. But look, I'm putting my faith in the negotiating team that the federal government has there, and I know the Prime Minister is very involved in this as well. So the people at the table, they know more than I know, than unless you're at the table. So certainly I can hear what I hear from the president and from some businessmen. I can see what the tweets are, but I don't really know what's at that table. So we're just trying to be supportive of that table. And the booze thing, the American booze thing, is a good example. At one point, I did reach out to the Prime Minister and say, I don't know what's happening at the table. We have all this alcohol. We'd like to sell it, but is it helpful to have that, at the table as a discussion point? And I say, well, if you can hold off a little longer, hold off a little longer.
That was really irked.
Yeah, that's it. It's a real irritant for them, right? So then, a few months go by, and I say, what do you think? What do you think? Can we sell it? Yeah, I think you can. So there's things happening at that table. So I think as a country, we need to support the people at that table. That whole Team Canada approach, I'm still a believer in that. But certainly, yeah, the ability to trade freely with the United States is a big asset that I hope stays intact.
On American booze, other provinces seem to be following Nova Scotia's lead and selling the booze off and giving the profits to charity.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I won't deny that somebody suggested that to me. Somebody I know very closely said, "Hey, why don't you do this?" And I'm like, well, "That's a great idea, right?" So, but certainly when we did that, I did start to have calls from other premiers to say, "That's a good idea. I think we're going to do that too." But there's no. Nobody takes ownership over good ideas. We just try to do what's right.
Okay. Certainly diversification is a big part of dealing with what's going on with the trade of the United States. And one of the big things, of course, are these big projects. And Wind West, you've talked a lot about, certainly championing that. It's been selected by Ottawa as one of the fast-track projects. When might we see agreements signed? When might we see shovels in the ground on that?
Yeah, so that one I'm really excited about. Wind West, the potential there. Nova Scotians are really kind of gravitating, catching on to that, I guess. But we could produce almost 25% or 27% of Canada's energy needs from offshore wind because we have great wind speeds. It blows a lot. The water depths are good, so the bottom's kind of solid, so you can have the fixed turbine instead of the floating one. So the factors are all in play for us. So it's a huge opportunity. But we can produce 40, 50, 60 gigawatts out there. We only need 2. So when you produce that much and you only need 2, you got to be able to export it. So the question mark is, how do we get it to those markets? And that'll be a cable, probably into Quebec and down. Yeah, so the next step on that is to do a market assessment, a feasibility study, and got my fingers crossed. We have a lot of discussions with the federal government on some funding for that study so we can start to identify pricing and customers, but I'm really hopeful that is really soon.
Look, we need to talk about Nova Scotia Power. It's something that you've been very vocal about. Clearly not pleased with how they've handled the cyber attack, the billing, and the pricing. But what can you do as a government? It's a regulated industry. Is it a matter that you might be able to offer rebates to customers?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. First off, we hold them to account to make sure that their bills are fair and accurate, and there's a lot of work happening on that. But really, in the long term, talking about energy prices, like we need to look at the fuel that they're using. Right, so right now they use a lot of natural gas to generate electricity for us, I think up to 20%, and all that natural gas comes through the United States. So would it be cheaper, do you think, if we could produce our own gas in Nova Scotia and use it right here, or do we produce it in Alberta or BC, produce it there and move it all the way across, and then we buy it, so it costs a lot more. So this is why we're talking about the opportunities that we have in producing natural gas here, onshore, offshore, oil and gas, huge opportunities. But I think long term, meeting our own energy needs in a cost-efficient way is going to require us to move on some big projects.
What about the short term, though? These people who have these outrageous bills.
The onshore could be relatively short term, but we have to make sure that we can do it safely and sustainably, and there's a lot of work happening on that. But that would be a short-term thing that could bring the bills of people down pretty quick, and it would also offer an alternative to Nova Scotia Power if you could get on natural gas for a number of things.
Would you have liked to see the utility make a grand gesture to Nova Scotians to compensate them, or to, and when I say compensate, to recognize that it has been a difficult time for a lot of people in terms of their, the bills and the pricing that they've been dealing with, and we've been reporting on it every night almost.
This is a discussion that I actually have with them. I wish they would be more loyal to Nova Scotians in general. I think Nova Scotia Power, as Emera, has built a big enterprise and started here. They have all kinds of other operations, and I often have the discussion with them about, don't forget where you came from, and treat Nova Scotians just a little more fairly, if you could. But absolutely on the billing thing, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out when they have the actuals. Are they overbilling? It certainly seems like they are to a lot of people. Or are they actually underbilling? The actuals will show that. But certainly holding them to account on a level of fairness is a major, major priority for me, because it's a priority for Nova Scotians.
Last thing I'd like to address with you is the deficit. It's forecast to hit $1.2 billion. It was a surplus not long ago. Roughly half of that is spent on healthcare, and you've made big spends on a lot of areas in healthcare. But is that sustainable if we have an aging population and healthcare just continually devours whatever money is put into it?
The healthcare spend is significant for sure. We have to invest in healthcare to deliver healthcare for Nova Scotians. I've been passionate about that. We've made incredible progress, but in actual fact, most of the deficit is coming from measures that we've taken to help people with the affordability crisis. Tax breaks, those cost a lot of money, but it puts money back in the hands of people. It's an investment in people. They can maybe spend it again. The school lunch program, it's helping a lot of kids. Millions of meals served. That didn't exist before, but it costs a lot of money. Taking the bridge tolls off, free parking, all these things that we've done to try to make life a little more affordable for Nova Scotians, investing taxpayer money back in Nova Scotians. That's how we got a deficit. So in the long term, to answer your question, I'm not interested in cutting things, but I'm interested in growing our economy. That's why we want to have this really frank, fair discussion about our natural resources, where we have incredible potential. We just can't say no, because saying no has ramifications. It's not just you say no and that's the end of it. It has ramifications. We have potential. I am incredibly optimistic about the future of this province, incredibly optimistic, if we work together to realize on that potential.
And just quickly, if you would, 2026, what do you think the biggest challenge for your province is going to be?
I think that the challenge will be around working with Nova Scotians to develop our resources and get projects going, for sure, because we have to address the deficit, to make sure that people have opportunities here where they can stay and have a good career and have a great quality of life. That'll be important. But the relationship, the tariffs with the United States are going to loom large for a couple more years. But we're ready for that.
No doubt we'll be talking about that in the next 12 months. Premier, thank you very much for your time, and happy holidays.
Merry Christmas to you and to your watchers as well. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.